What's up, guys? I thought I would quickly cover a few things around due diligence and earnest money, or sometimes abbreviated DD and EMD, because I'm about to submit mine right now for a investment property I'm buying for an Airbnb project. You can catch the entire series that I have on my other channel on the Airbnb flip up here in the corner, I think. This side. Yep, over here. After like 100 videos, you'd think I would know by now which side the cards go on. We negotiated that deal with a $1,000 due diligence and a $1,500 earnest money deposit. So let's go into that in terms of negotiating, in terms of the test, and in terms of the deadlines for when you need to submit these. Let's start with due diligence. Well, in North Carolina, we call it due diligence. In states like Texas, it's called the option fee, and it's a little bit different over there. And then in some states like Illinois and others, they call it different things. Here in North Carolina, it's called due diligence, and it's basically where you do your due diligence when buying a home. This means you do your general inspection, your termite inspection, your septic inspection, well inspection, survey, appraisal, and all of these other things should be done all within that due diligence period. That period of time is written in the initial contract that you give to the sellers, and typically it's about 30 days here. So you have 30 days to get all of these inspections, all of the due diligence that you want to put into it done in that 30-day time span. If something comes up and you want to back out for any reason at all, you can. But you will have to still pay that due diligence fee that you negotiated in the very beginning, and any other fees like your inspection fees and anything else that you put into the deal up front, besides the earnest money. I do want to reiterate, as a buyer, you can walk away for any reason. In terms of negotiating, as the buyer, what you're going to submit in your offer is your actual purchase price, or the offer price that you want to buy the home for. Any seller credit if you want the seller to pay for any closing costs or anything like that. And then you put your due diligence amount, and then you put your earnest money amount, and then you put the closing date. If you're in a competitive market like we are right now in 2021, the higher the due diligence amount, the better the offer. Why? Because if you put $5,000, let's say, as a due diligence amount, which isn't out of the question, we get some up to $10,000 sometimes that I've seen. That means the seller is almost guaranteed $5,000 if you were to back away as a buyer after inspections. So if I'm a seller and I know that my house may have some issues, or I just want to make sure and guarantee that this house sells on the first person, on the first contract that goes under, I would love to get a high due diligence from the buyer, knowing that if they were to walk away for any reason, I would get that money. And then I could just relist the house. So as for the timeline, as soon as the contract is signed, the buyer must immediately send out the due diligence money. The contract literally states, made payable and delivered to seller by the effective date. The effective date is the date that the buyer and seller have signed the contract or the counteroffer. So if the offer was signed today, my DD is in today. Some agents may argue that I should overnight these checks, and I have done that before, or hand delivered it, but basically, just hurry. The due diligence period ends on the due diligence date that you listed in the contract at 5 p.m. Once you pass that time, then the earnest money becomes at stake. Now, earnest money. Earnest money is also due once the contract is signed and is another negotiated amount during an offer. Mine on this property is $1,500, and I purposely did it higher than the due diligence because if I were to back out in that due diligence period, I would only lose that $1,000. It's a lot, $1,000, but I wouldn't lose out on the $1,500 yet. If the inspection comes back really bad, yeah, I'll lose out on the $1,000 and the inspection fees and all that, but I'll at least keep my $1,500 earnest money. So while the due diligence check is actually literally written to the seller in the seller's name, which I should have mentioned before, it pretty much goes straight into their personal bank accounts. The earnest money is actually sent to a trust account, and I send this to my attorneys that are conducting the closing. The reason this check, the earnest money check, goes to the attorneys in a trust account or escrow account is so that if this deal falls through during the due diligence period, it's easy for the attorneys to get that money and send it back to me. If you send a check to a seller, there's a good chance they probably already went out and bought a car or something with it. Most people live paycheck to paycheck in the US, so when people get money, they spend it. This check is also written out directly to the attorneys in the attorney's name, The earnest money check must be delivered within 5 days of signing of that contract, but again, good rule of thumb, just send it out immediately. Since we already grasped the concept of due diligence, this one shouldn't be that hard to comprehend. If you pass that 30-day due diligence period and then you decide to back out for any reason, you now lose both the due diligence money and that earnest money amount, which in my case would be a total of $2,500, plus inspections and appraisals and all the other stuff. Now, why would I lose all of this? Because me as the buyer, holding out this long in a contract period makes it where the seller is owning this house and paying taxes and mortgage and all that just for me to back out of the deal, and that's not fair to them. They need to collect on your earnest money so they can pay their mortgage and taxes and insurance and other costs for holding that property while we decided to just wait until the last minute to back out. Especially if you've already done inspections several weeks ago and knew what was at stake, and then let me wait till the last day to just back out. Again, not fair to the sellers. So just a really quick recap here. Due diligence is a period of time, usually 30 days here in North Carolina or whatever's negotiated, where a buyer can do their due diligence with inspections and other stuff. The buyer can back out for any reason during this period, but will lose out on that due diligence amount. Now, this amount used to be as low as like $250 in a normal, slower market. Now, due diligence must be sent immediately when the contract is signed and straight into the seller's name. Earnest money is refunded back to you as the buyer unless you wait until after the due diligence period, where you'll lose both the due diligence and the earnest money amount. Earnest money goes to a third party, usually the attorneys, to be held so you can get it back more easily if you back out. What I didn't mention before is that both the due diligence and the earnest money amount go towards the purchase price of the property. These are not just some fees that you pay up front and never see again. These actually go towards that purchase price if you go through with the house sale. I hope that was helpful. I just put my due diligence in the mail straight out to the seller's name, and it may take a few days extra to get there. Again, people will argue that I should overnight these checks. And I typically do hand deliver it to an agent or put it in their office, their personal box or something like that. But in this case, they are just a city away, and that's too far of a drive for me to do today. And I communicated that with that agent. She's fully aware and okay. Then I already went to my Keller Williams office where our in-house attorneys are at and hand delivered the earnest money check to them. And that check was written out to the attorney office's name. We are ready to get this moving. Inspections are next week. Thanks again for watching. Remember to hit that like button so YouTube will spread this video out to all the other agents so they all know what it means, and it can really help your business, even if they're your competitor, or if you want to consider an agent that, or whoever you're negotiating with on the other side. You want your buyer agents to know what they're doing if you're a listing agent on a house so you can get your sellers their money. I'll see you all in the next video.